There is a massive industry built on telling you how to feel better. Buy this crystal. Download this meditation app. Repeat these affirmations every morning in the mirror. Burn sage in every corner of your house. And if none of that is working, maybe you just need to try harder, think more positively, or find a better crystal. Here is the thing nobody in that industry wants you to figure out. Most of the people selling you those tools are just as stuck as you are. And the reason they are stuck, the reason so many individuals who are genuinely trying to grow never seem to actually get there, is not because they are performing the wrong rituals. It is because they are completely avoiding the one thing that actually creates change. Carl Jung figured this out over a century ago. He spent decades studying human transformation. Not the performance of transformation, not the feeling of transformation, actual, measurable, real transformation. And what he discovered was both simple and brutal. You do not grow by adding things to your life. You grow by removing what is keeping you small. Today I am going to walk you through 5 specific things that Jung identified as the heaviest anchors on human consciousness. These are not bad habits. They are not surface-level behaviors you can swap out with a better morning routine. These are deep psychological patterns that most people have built their entire identity around. And that is exactly what makes them so hard to release. Now, when I say release, I do not mean manage. I do not mean reduce. I mean let die entirely. Because Jung was very clear, you cannot carry low-frequency patterns and expect to operate at a high frequency. It does not work that way. You cannot put clean water into a contaminated tank and expect it to stay clean. Something has to go. So, let us get into it. These are the 5 things you must fully surrender if you are serious about raising your consciousness. Not kind of serious, not spiritually curious, serious. The first thing, the need to be perceived as a good person. I want you to think about how much energy you spend every single day managing what other people think of you. You bite your tongue in a conversation because you do not want to come across as judgmental. You say yes to something you absolutely do not want to do because saying no feels selfish. You smile through situations that make you feel frustrated or disrespected because you do not want people to think you are difficult. You silence the parts of yourself that are inconvenient for others to witness. And you probably call this being a good person. Jung called it something else. He called it the persona. That is, the mask you put on every single morning before you walk out the door. The version of yourself that has been carefully constructed to earn approval, avoid rejection, and make people comfortable enough to keep you around. And here is the hard truth Jung kept returning to in his work. The persona is not you. It is a performance. And performing goodness is one of the most exhausting, low-frequency ways a human being can move through the world. Think about what drives it. It is not actually love or integrity or genuine care for others. It is fear. Fear of being seen as bad. Fear of being rejected. Fear that if you stop performing, people will discover who you actually are and decide you are not worth keeping around. That fear, that constant background hum of needing to appear acceptable, keeps you vibrating at the frequency of survival, not growth, not freedom. Survival. Jung studied individuals who had genuinely transformed, and what he noticed was that they had stopped trying to appear good and started being real. And real meant they could be warm and they could be firm, generous and boundaried, compassionate and honest. Even when honesty was uncomfortable, people found this unsettling because a person who has dropped the good persona cannot be controlled with guilt or shame. You cannot say to them, "What kind of person does that?" and watch them collapse. They already know exactly what kind of person they are, and they are not interested in your editorial. Now, here is the part that makes this so difficult to actually do. For many individuals, being the good person is not just a social habit. It was a survival strategy developed in childhood. Maybe being good was how you kept the peace in a volatile household. Maybe performing kindness was how you earned love that should have been unconditional. Maybe being agreeable was how you made yourself small enough to stay safe. So when you start to release this pattern, it does not just feel uncomfortable. It feels like psychological annihilation, because the self you built around goodness has to die for something more authentic to take its place. Jung would tell you that you have actually released this need when you can disappoint someone and feel okay. Not great, not proud, just okay, stable, grounded. You feel grounded in your own knowing, without needing to chase them down and over-explain yourself until they forgive you. That stability is what higher consciousness actually feels like. Not performance, groundedness. The second thing, the compulsion to fix, save, and heal everyone around you. If you are someone who identifies as empathetic, sensitive, a natural helper, I need you to sit with what I am about to say. Your desire to help people may not be as selfless as you think it is. Jung studied what he called the wounded healer archetype. These are people who are magnetically drawn to those who are suffering, who feel most alive when they are needed, who organize their schedules, their relationships, and their sense of purpose entirely around the act of helping others. And what Jung found over and over again was that this compulsion was almost never about the other person. It was about the helper. When your sense of value is built on being needed, you will unconsciously seek out people who need you. When your identity is rooted in being the one who holds everything together, you will surround yourself with people who are falling apart. And here is the darkest part of this pattern. When those people start to get better, start to become more capable and self-sufficient, you may unconsciously pull away from them or find new reasons they still need you. Because if they are okay, who are you? This is not compassion. This is codependency wearing compassion's clothing, and it operates at a very low frequency because it is entirely rooted in lack. I am not enough unless I am needed. My life has no meaning unless I am fixing something. I cannot stop helping long enough to sit with my own unresolved pain. And so the helping never stops, and neither does the low frequency. Jung observed that people who had genuinely evolved were able to offer support when it was asked for and appropriate, and step back when it was not. They did not feel compelled to jump in and rescue. They could watch someone struggle and trust that the struggle had a purpose. They understood the difference between being of service and being driven by a wound that has not been addressed. Releasing this pattern does not make you cold. I want to be very clear about that. It makes you discerning. It means you help from a place of fullness instead of from a place of need. It means your generosity has roots instead of being a compulsive behavior that runs on autopilot. But giving up the helper identity is genuinely painful. Because if you are not the person everyone leans on, you have to face the question of who you actually are without that role. And that question can feel terrifying when your whole sense of self has been structured around being useful to other people. Jung would say, you have released this when you can hear someone describe a problem and respond with genuine presence without immediately producing a list of solutions. When you can let someone sit in their difficulty without making it your emergency. When you can say, that sounds really hard, and mean it without following it with an offer to fix it. That is care without control. True maturity requires us to acknowledge that we cannot carry everyone else's burdens while simultaneously expecting to elevate our own mental and spiritual state. The heavy anchors of fixing others serve primarily as an escape from the interior labor required within our own minds. By leaving behind these external projects, we return to the essential task of self-discovery. To truly honor the philosophy of Jung, one must realize that these internal anchors operate silently beneath our daily awareness. The mask of the good person and the shield of the perpetual savior are merely the first two layers of a much deeper psychological structure designed to protect us from looking at our own shadow. The shadow represents all the hidden elements of ourselves that we reject, deny, or find unacceptable. Yet it holds the exact energy needed to spark real consciousness. When we spend our days maintaining a flawless outward projection, we starve the inner self of the vital nutrition it requires to grow and evolve. We become spiritual actors on a stage of our own making, reading lines from a script written by societal expectations and childhood adaptations, rather than living out our true potential. The shift into higher awareness demands that we step off this stage entirely and sit in the silence of our unvarnished reality. This silence can initially feel like a vacuum, an empty space where our identity used to be, causing many to run back to their old patterns out of sheer panic. They buy another book, join another group, or take on another person's crisis, just to avoid the quiet confrontation with their own soul. But if you can stay in that empty space without rushing to fill it with external noise, a new kind of strength begins to crystallize from within. You begin to notice that you do not need the reflection of approval or usefulness to confirm your existence or validate your inherent worth. You exist simply because you exist, and that realization is the ultimate foundation of psychological freedom. As we continue to dissect the patterns holding human consciousness in a state of perpetual stagnation, we must look at how these dynamics manifest in our closest relationships. When you operate from the persona of the good person, your relationships are built on an unspoken contract of mutual accommodation rather than authentic connection. You agree to never upset them, and they agree to validate your goodness, creating a fragile peace that shatters the moment anyone speaks an inconvenient truth. Similarly, the helper dynamic establishes an unequal balance of power, where one individual must remain diminished so the other can feel spiritually superior. Breaking these contracts requires immense courage, because it alters the social ecosystem you have spent years cultivating, often leading to resistance from those who benefited from your compliance. Yet, Jung reminds us that the discomfort of relational friction is infinitely preferable to the slow death of internal compromise. When you choose authenticity over approval, you naturally filter out connections that were dependent on your self-diminishment, leaving space for relationships rooted in genuine resonance. This is where consciousness moves from an abstract concept into a lived reality, changing how you speak, how you listen, and how you hold space for yourself and others. It transforms your daily existence from a series of exhausting defensive maneuvers into a creative expression of your essential nature. By letting go of the need to manage external perceptions and fix external problems, you reclaim the vast reservoirs of psychic energy that were previously locked away in the service of survival. This reclaimed energy is what allows an individual to finally transition from a state of coping to a state of actual evolution. It provides the psychological stamina needed to face the remaining anchors that Jung identified, patterns that deal with our attachment to suffering, our fear of the unknown, and our hidden desires for control. Transformation is never a comfortable journey of accumulation. It is a fierce process of striping away the illusions we have mistaken for our true selves. It requires us to stand naked before our own awareness, stripped of our titles, our good deeds, and our righteous roles, and ask what remains when everything else is gone. The answer to that question is not something that can be taught in a seminar or packaged in a wellness product. It is a truth that can only be uncovered through total surrender. We must also recognize that the modern wellness culture often commodifies the very defenses Jung warned us against, rebranding the persona as lifestyle design and codependency as radical empathy. This creates a confusing landscape where individuals believe they are ascending to higher states of consciousness when they are actually just perfecting their psychological armor. They mistake the emotional high of a new ritual for the deep, unsettling work of structural character change, remaining trapped in the same low-frequency loops while using more sophisticated vocabulary to describe them. To break free from this trap, one must cultivate a radical, unwavering honesty with oneself, questioning the underlying motivation behind every spiritual practice and every act of service. If the motivation is rooted in the maintenance of an image or the avoidance of personal pain, it will inevitably keep the consciousness anchored. Surrendering these patterns is not a one-time event, but a continuous, daily practice of conscious choosing. Every time you choose to say a difficult no instead of a resentful yes, you are loosening the grip of the good person persona. Every time you allow someone you love to experience their own consequences without rushing in to rescue them, you are dismantling the wounded healer archetype within yourself. These small, seemingly quiet choices accumulate over time, gradually shifting your baseline frequency from fear-based survival to love-based freedom. You begin to move through the world with a light footprint, no longer needing to extract validation from your environment because your validation comes from the alignment of your actions with your internal truth. This is the simple, brutal, and beautiful reality of true psychological transformation as Jung understood it, and it vibrates much higher than the rescuing ever did. The third thing, the attachment to being understood. How many conversations have you had where you spent 20, 30, or 40 minutes trying to make someone comprehend why you felt a certain way or made a specific choice? You explained it one way and they did not get it. So you tried another angle. Still nothing. So you rephrased it again, hoping that this time the right combination of words would finally make them see. And when it still did not work, you walked away feeling invisible, dismissed, and completely alone inside your own experience. Jung identified this pattern as one of the most subtle and most destructive forces keeping individuals stuck at lower levels of consciousness. And the reason it is so destructive is because of what it reveals about your relationship with yourself. If you need other people to comprehend you in order to feel valid, you have not yet developed what Jung called internal authority. You are still outsourcing your sense of reality to other people's ability to grasp it. Let me say that again because it is worth sitting with. You are outsourcing your sense of reality to other people's ability to comprehend it. That means your inner experience only feels real, only feels legitimate when someone else confirms it. And that is a deeply unstable foundation to build a life on. Because most people, even the ones who love you, do not have access to your inner world. They have never lived inside your body. They have never seen the world through your specific history and your specific perception. They literally cannot fully understand you, and waiting for them to do so before you feel grounded in your own experience means you will be waiting for a very long time. What Jung found in people who operated at genuinely elevated levels of consciousness was that they had a completely different relationship with being understood. They would share their experience when it felt right, and when the other person was capable of receiving it. But they did not need that person to get it in order to feel solid. They knew what they knew. They felt what they felt, and that did not change based on whether anyone around them could follow along. This is not arrogance and it is not isolation. It is deep self-trust. Releasing the need to be understood requires you to build a relationship with your own inner knowing that is strong enough to stand without external confirmation. And that is uncomfortable work, especially if you were raised in an environment where your perceptions were regularly dismissed, minimized, or contradicted. Jung warned that this release comes with a definite cost. When you stop explaining yourself and stop chasing understanding, some relationships will naturally dissolve. People who are used to you performing and justifying and over-explaining will not know what to do with your quiet confidence. They may accuse you of being cold or closed off. What is actually happening is that you are creating space for a different kind of connection, one where you do not have to earn your right to exist. You will know you have released this when someone fundamentally misunderstands you and you feel sad, maybe, but not destabilized. When you can be completely unseen in an interaction and walk away without needing to go back and try again. When your inner world feels real and valid, regardless of whether anyone else can access it. That is self-trust. And self-trust is a high-frequency state. The fourth thing, the fantasy of who someone could become. This one is going to land hard for a lot of people. You have someone in your life, maybe a parent, maybe a partner, maybe a close friend, and they consistently let you down, hurt you, disappoint you, or fall short in ways that matter deeply to you. But you stay, or you keep trying, or you keep the door open because you can see who they could be. You can see the version of them that has done the healing work, the version that has confronted their patterns and made different choices, the version that finally shows up the way you need them to. You keep relating to that future version instead of the actual human being standing in front of you right now. Jung called this projection, and he was emphatic that it is one of the most powerful forces keeping people trapped in painful, repetitive dynamics. Here is the crucial thing Jung understood. When you see potential in someone and relate to that potential instead of who they actually are right now, you are not actually seeing them. You are seeing something you have placed onto them. A story you desperately need to be true. A version of them you need to exist, because the alternative, accepting who they actually are, would require you to make tough decisions you are not ready to make. Maybe you need them to be safe so you can stop feeling anxious. Maybe you need them to change so you do not have to face how much energy you have poured into this relationship. Maybe you need them to become who they could be, because losing the hope of that would feel like losing everything. Whatever the need is, it belongs entirely to you, not to them. Jung found that people who had genuinely elevated their consciousness had learned to see people with clear eyes. Not cynically, not without hope, but clearly. They could observe someone's behavior, take it seriously, and make decisions based on what was actually present rather than what they were hoping would eventually materialize. This does not mean people cannot change. They can, but they change on their own timeline, for their own reasons, when they are ready. And you do not have the ability to want it into existence on their behalf. Releasing the fantasy of who someone could become requires grief. Real grief. Because you are not just letting go of a hope, you are letting go of a person who does not actually exist. A version of someone you have loved, maybe for years, who was never really there. Jung said this grief was non-negotiable. You cannot skip it. You have to actually mourn the person you thought they could be. You must do this before you can see the person they are. And once you can see them clearly, you can make a real decision. Not a decision based on potential or possibility or hope, but a decision based on current reality. Is this person, as they are right now, someone who belongs in my life? That is the only question that matters. You will know you have released this when you can watch someone show you exactly who they are and believe them the first time. When you can stop overlaying the story of their potential onto every single interaction. When you can make choices about your relationships based on what is actually there, not what you wish were there. That is true clarity, and it is one of the most liberating frequencies a person can operate from. The fifth thing, the identity of being wounded. This is the hardest one, and I want to approach it with real care. If you have been through trauma, and most of us have in some form, acknowledging that matters deeply. Feeling the pain of what you went through matters. Understanding how those experiences shape the way you move through the world matters. Jung did not question any of that. What he did question was what happens when the wound becomes the absolute center of your identity. When the story of what happened to you becomes the most important story you tell. When your trauma history becomes your primary introduction to new people, your main framework for understanding yourself, and the lens through which you interpret every new experience. Because that is a fundamentally different thing from healing. Jung observed that many people who had done years of therapeutic work, who could articulate their wounds with great precision and depth, had never actually moved past the stage of identification with those wounds. They understood their trauma thoroughly, but they were still organizing their entire existence around it. They made choices through the filter of their wound. They formed relationships through the filter of their wound. They interpreted the world, other people's intentions, and their own limitations, all through the filter of what was done to them. And Jung was direct about what frequency that operates at. It is the frequency of victim consciousness. Not victim in any kind of shaming sense, but victim as an orientation. An orientation that says what was done to me determines what is possible for me. What happened back then shapes who I am today and who I will be tomorrow. He also noticed something that took real courage to say out loud. Many people unconsciously resist moving beyond the wounded identity because there are real benefits to holding on to it. People treat you more gently. Your struggles make sense to everyone. You belong to a specific community. You have an explanation for why things are hard. And you do not have to take full responsibility for who you are becoming because you can always point to what you went through.